I coined this term agent experience, or AX, as a new discipline in the same vein as UX or DX. That's really the discipline of building products for agents and making them a great experience for agents and making them easy to access.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Hanger DX podcast. This is a podcast about developer experience and how engineering teams solve productivity challenges at scale. I'm your host, Ankit, co founder of Aviator. At Aviator, we build developer productivity tools, including multiplayer AI coding and merge queues. Today, my guest is Matt Biilmann, founder of Netlify, and we're going to talk about a lot of new ideas that Matt has shared along this journey in developer experience, more specifically around AI experience or AX or agentic experience, I think. So before we get started, Matt, welcome. Really excited to have you here. Can you please introduce yourself for the audience?
Yeah, hi. Great to be here. I'm Matt Biilmann. I'm CEO and co-founder of Netlify. Founded Netlify a bit more than 10 years ago now, so it's been a moment since we first launched, back in a world where at the time front-end developers were sort of seen as a kind of pseudo developer, right? Like they were kind of people that would get a Photoshop file and then slice it and hand it over to like a real developer. They could then actually implement it into something. And back when I started Netlify, I coined this term Jamstack and started building sort of this whole community around this idea of like if we decoupled that front end experience layer of the web from all the back end infrastructure stuff and build real platforms and tooling around that self-standing front-end layer, then these front-end developers would probably just go on and become the mainstream web developers and build most of the things themselves, right? Like, and that kind of happened. Today there's something like 17 million professional JavaScript developers, um, and they're definitely sort of like the mainstream web developers building with modern front-end frameworks and on platforms like ours at Netlify. Like we sort of couple together CI/CD, edge distribution, and hosting into one sort of workflow and called it a front-end cloud, right? Like, and now we're sort of in this new stage where AI has kind of sort of led to the next kind of like foundational shift like that, where suddenly computers can write code for us, right? Like, which is pretty mind blowing. And it means that there's now this whole sort of new cohort of like vibe coders, and they're definitely not real developers and so on, right? Like they're shipping all this code suddenly. Um, and I'm operating in sort of a similar thesis that if we can build the end-to-end tooling to make it safe for them to ship products to production, a large part of that, what they do, will basically just be like what we call web development in the future. So sitting right sort of in the midst of all of this happening and building a lot of the infrastructure and tooling for enabling that.
Very cool. So there's a lot of things there. Obviously, we're going to talk about agent experience, but given that we are on this track of vibe coding, we were discussing this briefly earlier as well, which is like, okay, the line of being a developer isn't as binary anymore. Uh, what do you think? How does this look like in the next few years? And what do you think are the implications of bringing sort of like, a completely new group of people who can now be builders?
Yeah, I think people are actually still underestimating in general the implications of the fact that LLMs can generate code, right? Like, and that they're getting better and better at it, and the rate of improvement is pretty exceptional, right? Like if you think about like 1.5 years ago, what you could do with an LLM generating code versus now, it's like completely night and day, right? And code has been this very special thing, right? Like I see it almost at the level of like the printing press or something like that, right? Like where before that, writing was this like very exclusive binary thing, right? Like where having reading and writing skills was something that a very, very small part of the population had, and it wielded like great power. And there were so many different levels of it, right? Like at the most basic level, you could have a very good career just by being a scribe, like literally just by being able to read and write, right? Like there's like, and then up to like priests and all of these that sort of held the access to like the sacred text of the world back then. And then with the printing press, all of that kind of shifted, right? Like, and it completely shifted also the impact of writing across our whole society and became something that like every profession needs to have, and that like kind of built into all of what we do. And it meant that it was not like a binary thing anymore, right? Like you still have a large group of people in the world that are employed as professional writers, where that's literally what they do, right? Like, but you don't have any professional scribes anymore, right? Like now it's sort of like moved up a level, right? Like it's not enough to just be able to do the reading and writing. You have to be a very articulate and strong writer. But all of us, even if we're not professional writers as our job title, probably need to be pretty good at writing, right? And I think now we're in this moment where the same thing is happening to code, where code was kind of very similar, right? Like almost like this binary thing that you either knew the code or not. And if you knew the code, you held sort of the key to the underlying substrate of the whole digital world, right? Like the underlying sacred text that made computers do things. And there was like small group of human population, maybe 1%, that actually had access to code in that sense, and the rest didn't. LLMs are fundamentally changing that, right? Like code is just not the same barrier anymore, and it's getting like the evolution of LLMs means that that code as a barrier will be like less and less of a thing. And I think that will transform, just like the printing press transformed what writing means in the world. I think it will transform what building software means in the world, right? Like, and it
Interesting.
will make development much more of a fluid thing rather than a binary thing. Just like with writing, I think there'll be way more professional developers in the future because of this, but it'll also be something that people are just supposed to be able to do some of in all kinds of roles.
Interesting. So I know, kind of like, this is. It does seem like this is happening right now, or as we speak.
Yeah,
There is one aspect to software development which, like, even as an engineer, I feel like the hardest part of software development is not just building new products; it's about maintaining existing products,
yeah,
right? And also like just the
totally.
whole DevOps infrastructure side of things.
Yeah,
So, what does this mean? And also, I think related to this is like just the quality of the product
yeah, yeah,
people build,
yeah.
right? So what does that mean? Like, how do you think this is gonna play out?
Yeah, as we know, before this change, people only built very high quality products with very high quality. I mean, I think as always, we'll have a very broad range of like people building low quality and high quality. And I don't really think this changes that. It just changes the volume of stuff getting built. But I do think for the DevOps and platform industry, right? Like we kind of always build our company around this idea of like if we are fairly opinionated, we can build automation that ties together workflows and infrastructure in a way that lets team ship with zero automation. And I think that line of thinking gets more and more critical the cheaper it becomes to produce code, right? Like imagine if every vibe coding app, if the output of that was like a Kubernetes cluster, right? I mean, that would just like mean that it would be completely unviable to do anything, right? Like because you die under the maintenance load immediately, right? So it's clear that if we want more people to be able to build more faster, we need to invest more in these shared layers of automation and maintenance, so that to drive down those maintenance costs. Otherwise it's not viable, right? Like, so I think that part of our industry becomes really important, but it'll probably also to some of it will shift from internal DevOps teams to building companies with a great agent experience that agents can build and develop against, just to like otherwise we just won't be able to foster the level of like sustained output and throughput that we can get to with LLMs producing a lot of code. The role of building this kind of automation becomes really essential, right? Like because it becomes even more of a multiplier in a way, right? Like if you're a good DevOps team, you're kind of like a multiplier for your development team, right? Like, and you're kind of like, how can we allow these teams to ship faster with less risk, get more immediate feedback loops, safer rollbacks, iteration patterns, like continuous deployment, all of these practices, right? Like, and that's if you just imagining everyone in your company now becoming a developer, right? Like then the ability to unlock those kind of constraints just becomes like even more impactful that they've been so far. And the sort of really original DevOps motions of like fully programming these flows and getting like as fast iteration cycles as you can becomes like really essential.
Very interesting. So obviously, this segues greatly, like perfectly into agent experience. That
Yeah,
topic you mentioned early in
yeah,
2025.
yeah.
So maybe share with the audience first what is like the high level concept of agent experience, and then we will dive into like specific details.
Yeah, so back in the 90s, Don Norman coined this term user experience or UX that we all take for granted today, right? But that wasn't at the time. You might more evaluate a product as like a feature list, a checklist of does it do these things? And UX was kind of the sense that that's not enough. Users actually have an experience in the interaction with that product that can differentiate the product from other products, right? Like, and that can be a massive determinate, like, can determine if this product is successful enough. That's not just the features in the product. It's like the packaging, the manual, the onboarding, the user interface, the design, the brand. All of that flows into the user experience and sets one product apart from the other. And then back, I think in 2010, Jeremiah Lee coined this term developer experience that was really centered around the idea of platforms are platforms because developers can build on top of them and can extend them and do things with them in some way. And in a similar way as this shift towards UX, he had this notion, right? Like that it's not just about do you have an API or an SDK. It's actually about like what's the holistic experience for a developer to build on top of your platform. How easy is it to understand your documentation? How well is your CLI tooling? All of these pieces flows into like what is the developer experience, and platform teams are often held accountable to build a good developer experience, right? Like for the developers using their platform. And what I started seeing in the end of last year was that we started having this new persona trying to do things with Netlify, which was an autonomous agent, right? That some user had said, like, go do this thing or go deploy a website. There's then trying to use Netlify. And I realized that there's a new layer of experience there, right? Like that these agents are different from traditional software and they are not programmed upfront to do something. They're trying to figure out how to do something. And that means that there's like a holistic experience of your product that can really determine whether they're successful or not. So I coined this term agent experience or AX as a new discipline in the same vein as UX or DX. That's really the discipline of building products for agents and making them a great experience for agents and making them easy to access, figuring out like how do we add agents actually get to use your product at all or interface with it, right? Potentially orchestrating agents from within your product and making it easy to kick work out to them or make them do stuff. And then managing the context of agents. That's really like the context engineering is sort of such like core concept for LLMs of like how do they actually reason about your interactions and your projects, and then building tools for agents. Like what kind of tools do we actually need to have to give agents a great experience when building on top of our platforms?
Amazing. So there is a concern that like focusing on too much on agents creates sort of like this world which is like non-human web, is how I
Hmm.
would kind of like call it. Like, what do you think about that? What does it mean for like the human creativity, like the human involvement in the whole building experience side of things?
I think I think it's not like written in stone somehow, right? Like we're very much creating the future right now, and we're in that mode, right? Like so, it's a bit up to all of us what kind of future do we want to create, and there's a lot of opportunities in this. So I'm not looking so much towards like the fear of like, oh, what does this intermediation mean and so on. I'm looking more into like, okay, what are the opportunities? If way more people can build software way easier, right? If we loosen some of the constraints around like how fast you can iterate, how can we make sure that people can build even better software and reach other people with that software even faster and create more interesting experiences and so on. And I just see so much opportunity in that other side of it just doesn't worry me so much, right? Like, yeah, there will also be, obviously, people will want to do a ton of stuff with your software through agents and not directly. And I think we should just fully lean into that. Like, if people want an agent to deploy to Netlify for them without them having to go to our UI, that we should just make that happen, right? Like, um, if people, no matter what you do, people are probably going to interact with your software through agents, right? Like, through computer use or browser extensions or new browsers that are agentic, right? Like, so that part is just going to happen, right? Like, but the fact that these agents allow us to build and create video on demand and create like images and like, that should just be tools we use to allow way more people to build really interesting things. And the obvious place for them to build these interesting things is the web, because it's like, it's the only platform that have fast enough distribution to keep up with the speed of creation now, right? Like, if
Right.
if you can build something in a prompt and then you got to wait a week for an app store to get it in front of users, that just feels like a ridiculous discrepancy, right? Like, you want a URL and you want to share it now. And
That's
the
fair.
web is also sort of like this one platform where we can all kind of just go crazy and evolve it together, right? Like, I think that's why we're starting to see a whole new set of browser wars, which to me, again, right, like, people are talking about this, oh, it's going to be the death of the open web. And then at the same time, we're now seeing like this massive surge in new companies investing in building browsers. And I don't think like that would happen if everybody thought like, oh, the web is going to go away, like, it's not
Right.
going to be important, right? Like, then you probably wouldn't see OpenAI and Google and Microsoft and Perplexity and even Atlassian invest in evolving the browser space. So I'm very bullish in that side on like all of that. All of this has like massive opportunity for us to build more things on the web and build more interesting things on the web and more interactive things and more engaging things. It's just up to all of us to strengthen that aspect of it, and then the open web will do really well.
Very cool. I also think this might be like a new dimension, like somewhat similar to within the web, there is web pages which consumer
Yeah,
users use, and then there are APIs that developers use.
yeah.
So in a way, kind of like this could be just another dimension of it, which is just used by agents.
Yeah, and it mixes things a lot more, right? Like, the agents will use all of them, right? Like, you, like, again, you open
That's
Atlas
true.
as a browser, right? Like, and you will have agents interact with the DOM of your website. Um, but it might also like, I had it like, I was testing it out and I was doing something with my calendar, right? And just trying to say, oh, summarize this week for me. And then I said, summarize next week. And the first when I said summarize this week, it was looking at the DOM of the calendar view I had open and extracting it from there. And when I said like summarize next week, it said, I can't see it right now, but I can connect to the calendar API and look at it. Do you want me to connect, right? Like, so you start seeing these agents are just going to interact with any kind of surface area that you have, whether it's like DOM or images or APIs. And that's also why I think AX is going to be like such an important discipline, right? Like, because it's not about like you build an MCP and you're done, right? Like, it's actually about understanding that you're just going to have this massive new persona of all these different kind of agents that will be trying to do stuff with your product, whether you like it or not, right? Like, and they are either going to be having a good experience doing it, and the users trying to get stuff out of them are going to have a good experience, they're going to be have a bad experience, right? Like, but it's up
Hmm.
to you to really understand what are people trying to accomplish and how do you make sure that it becomes a really good experience.
It's more about going catering to the users, including the
Yeah,
agents.
yeah.
So, what does that mean for web development? Do you think it's going to get simpler or more complex?
None of the above. We're going to see pieces of all of it, right? Like, again, the barrier to entry is going to go massively down, right? Like, right now, like, you can see it, right? Like, you can jump to bolt.new, plug in a prompt, and you can get a web project in front of the whole world in like very simple ways, right? Then there's going to be all these new complexities, right? Like, is that project ready for agents to consume as well? Does that project has an MCP and an API, and how does it play into like the indexing of OpenAI, right? Like, so we're going to add all of that complexity. In the short term, the LLMs are sort of very trained on how we build for the web right now. So a lot of it will be like making it really easy to build more of the same things we've built for a long time, right? Like, but then there'll also be the other notion of what are things that you can build if you're like really pushing the limits and you have the ability for LLMs to do all this crazy stuff like 3D programming, things that were just like we're finding a team that were skilled in 3ds and stuff like that would be like impossible, right? Like or doing like random manual canvas programming. Like there's just so many new opportunities that unlock when you have access to all these kind of like hyper specialists through LLMs that you couldn't have before, that I think will then also push us in new directions where if you want to stand out from everybody being able to very quickly generate a web project that looks like any other web project, what are the things you need to do if you want to like differentiate and really build something special. So in that way, I think it's too easy to say like, oh, it's going to make it simpler, it's going to make it more complex, it's going to go do all of that buff at the same time, right? Like it's going to
Hmm.
massively make it simpler to build the same things we built today, but that's also going to require us to push up the limits of complexity if we want to do something that really stands out.
Very cool. I also like this analogy of self-driving cars. So right now,
Yeah,
self-driving cars are very complex because you have to
yeah,
also deal with not just other self-driving cars, but with human
true.
drivers. But once most of the cars are self-driven, I think things can become a lot more streamlined and simple.
Yeah, it's really true that there'll be pieces that we can build into the whole end-to-end workflow once we take like the agents for granted in a different way.
Right. So you've also, given we're talking about simplicity, I know you've also talked a lot about these simple frameworks in the past.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit more about this philosophy? Like, I know also a big proponent of Astro framework. Uh,
Astro,
Give us some.
Tanstack. I mean, in general, when it comes to development, I'm like I've been doing this for many decades, and I've always felt that there's always a temptation of solving problems by finding very smart and clever solutions. And often the trade offs from solving problems in that way add so much complexity that the benefits of those like really smart and clever decisions are not really like worth it. And I think the same happens in the modern frameworks, right? Like I think over the last 5 years, we had this like massive push towards things like server-side React components, right? Complex techniques like PPR that like interleaves, like streaming on the edge with like rendering patterns and so on, right? I tend to think that most of the benefits you actually get from those kind of techniques are relatively small compared to radically simpler techniques to including the same. And the complexity you add to the frameworks and the infrastructure and to the whole world of libraries and so on tends to be so high that you end up in a much worse state of building. In that way, I've liked what Astro has done. I feel like for traditional websites that are like URL and content oriented, I think they have like a very simple, it's like Esther is a very simple mental model to work with. They've taken approaches that are much easier to reason about end to end. And I think that gives really great results and make it easy to build on top of. And then I think on the other hand, I really like what Tanner is doing with Tanstack these days that are more centered around the traditional single page application approach from a starting point, and then adding in different way of tying in like calls to API resources with like great querying and caching capabilities and so on, but in an end that like sort of have a clearer delimitation between like client and server and keeps those two worlds a bit more separate and easier to reason about. Yeah, and lately I've been really fascinated by what the Remix team is trying to do with Remix 3. It's definitely way too early to call it on that one, but it's been interesting to see them do two things at the same time. One, build with LLMs in mind up front and sort of really make it a test of everything they build. Like, can you get an LLM to write the code easily? And two, just like stripping back a lot of the abstractions we've built up over the last couple of years and trying to see, can we get back to something that's closer to like the event system of the DOM, and then the core idea of like reactive, like rendering declaratively from JSX, right? And I think that'll be really easy to follow this like attempt of re-simplifying.
Interesting. Okay. I haven't really played with Remix. I'll definitely go check it out
It's I mean
more.
you will get very confused because of their naming, right? Like they've gone through this like crazy journey where Remix 1 was one thing, and then Remix 2 kind of ended up merging with React Router and is now React Router, and then Remix
Interesting.
3 is a completely different framework that's nothing to do with the previous ticks. So that I I don't know
Interesting.
why they decided to do it exactly in that way, but I still think it's pretty fun to see what they're trying to do with Remix 3 now.
Very cool. Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit. You've mentioned a little bit when we talked about the whole agent experience in your articles and stuff you've written. You talk about this whole idea of like open and closed networks. Yeah, can you share a little bit more about that concept?
Yeah, I think that's another approach when you think about all of these agents, right? Like you can kind of take an approach where I think a lot of companies started pushing very hard to say, oh, agents are hot, so we got to add agents all over our product and build a bunch of custom agents into our product. And then there are other companies that are looking at this and saying like, people are probably going to have over time agents that they prefer and that they work with and that have memory with what they're doing, and that like they know how their models work really specifically. How do we make those agents work really fluently with our product, right? Like how do we focus on the agent experience versus building a bunch of custom agents? And those are sort of two really different approaches we see across the industry, right? Like some of the big examples would be, for example, Salesforce versus HubSpot, right? Salesforce has taken way more of an approach of like agent force, and here's like all of our custom agents that we're kind of trying to stuff down your throat. And HubSpot has taken much more the approach of like, here's our MCP server and our open agent marketplace, and like here's just like how we make the data and workflows inside HubSpot really trivial to work with through agents. Here's how we get HubSpot into ChatGPT, right? Like all of those decisions. Asana versus Linear, a little the same, right? Like Asana very heavily invested in building all kinds of agent stuff into their project management tool. Linear has taken much more of an approach of like, let's build a really great agent experience for Linear, right? Like let's make it really simple to access all the data through agents, whether you're building those agents yourself or it's ChatGPT or others. Let's make it easy to orchestrate agents directly from Linear, so you can just add mention the agents like a cursor agent or something like that, and it goes off and does stuff, and let's be quick at building those interfaces for agents to integrate into, right? And I think again, that's like a closed approach to saying like we want to build vertically around like our own world, or a more open approach where you say we want to build a really great agent experience and we expect there to be like a lot of choice on what kind of agents are you actually bringing to our product.
Interesting. What does it mean for companies out there, or like both for startups as well as for large companies? How do they build both an open system as well as build defensibility?
I think it's easier like for some of the incumbents it's a little like, I think Salesforce sees it as a sort of a very existential threat that they could be reduced to being more of a system of record than the whole platform, right? And I think that's more of an incumbent challenge than a startup challenge, right? Like I think if you started a company from scratch and thought like maybe I could be the system of record for all sales processes in companies, that would sound like a pretty cool opportunity, right? Like, and you wouldn't be so worried about like, oh, what am I giving away from being that? So I think it's also one of the moments where in some way it opens up the door for a lot of startups to execute without the craft of like a whole business model they are already fully reliant on.
Okay. Um, so maybe we can do a little bit of like rapid fire questions. I think we are coming like close to the time. Um, so let's see kind of like how much we can cover in that. So first is like on democratization of development. You keep
Yeah.
expanding who gets to be called like a developer. First it was like Jamstack, now it's like AI
Yeah.
agents. What's your vision on who builds the web in 10 years?
Yeah, I hope everybody does to some degree, right? Like I hope it's really frictionless to not just be a consumer but also a producer. And then at the same time, I don't think that like in no other media has that changed the fact that most people are consumers and a few people are really experts creators, right? Like, so I still think we'll see that same balance of like a probably even larger group than today of professional builders on the web. um, I just think that everybody will be able to build as well.
And what role does AI play in creativity? It's like an 8-year-old today can build a game using Bolt. Is that like, is it defining creativity? Is that like a person building it, or is it just like AI doing all the things and AI is like sort of like the next Picasso?
I think AI is just a tool for our creativity, just like any other tool we've had ahead of us, and we'll see AI enabling truly creative people to do even more impactful things because of their like strength of the tooling they're given. And I think when it comes to creativity, humans are inherently interested in the relationship to other humans through creativity. And I think that's never going to go away. You like, if you think about music or novels or art, you don't just care about it in isolation. You also feel that it's someone else communicating with you through a creative medium. AI is just going to be yet another medium, in my opinion, that allows humans to reach other people and create in the world.
Sweet. Okay, so I see there's a keyword behind you. I think you have a little bit of musical background to some degree.
I
Do you
have a
have any kind of?
bachelor in music and literature, and started a master's in cultural studies before I started doing all of this programming stuff professionally. I was always programming since I was 10 years old as a hobby, but
That's
my actual
amazing.
formal education is in music and culture and literature.
Very cool. So, is there a kind of like a inspiration you take from music, or kind of like there's a parallel between how you like music composition work versus, I don't know, code architecture?
For sure. I've always been saying that the original composers were kind of like the first programmers, like the classical composers, right? Like they wrote down these intricate like structures over time that you would then hand to a group of musicians that had to execute them in some ways, right? Like, so that's like a very similar mental model to writing code that needs to be executed by a computer, and writing a score that needs to be executed by a set of musicians and sort of be able to hold those abstract structures in your head. So I definitely always think there's been something similar there. Um, and then, as I said, a lot of these, like, what fascinated me about computers at the very first was that you could write something and instantly it could reach other people in the world, right? Like, and that was the same reason I was interested in like music and literature. Some individual could sit and write something, and it could suddenly have like huge meaning to tons of other people in the world. It could sometimes change the world, right? Like, lots of books, pieces of music over time has like actually changed the world just from someone sitting down and like either writing them or recording them or doing something, right? Like, and I think my fascinating with computers was from the same source, right? Like that someone could just sit down and do something mental work that could change the world. And the web became so fascinating to me because of that reach of it, right? Like that, when I realized that you could literally just like buy a domain and instantly everybody who has a computer can go there and see whatever thing you decide to put there. That was just such a radical thing at the time, and I think that core sort of realizations have been driving me since I first discovered that.
Love it. All right, then Matt, last question. Any predictions for 2026?
I think we'll start realizing more and more how deep the ability of LLMs writing code strikes in terms of them being able to participate in the whole digital world. I agree that like we are in these early stages of the decade of agents, right? Like, and that 2026 will really be driven by a lot of real world impact for those agents, and like abilities to get to the point where they start going deeper into how we work on them. um, I think the initial sort of hype and maybe shallowing of vibe coding will replaced with like massive actual impact of people starting to realize that they can build software for all kinds of purposes now. Um, but we'll also realize how much work from a platform level we need to put in place for people to be able to do that in like professional context where they're trying to work with like existing legacy code bases, data sources, all of that. And I'm pretty excited for how that will change people's relationship to not just being consumers of softwares but creators of software.
Right, Matt, this was a pleasure talking to you. It was a blast. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you again, everyone who was listening. If you're interested in developer experience or work in DevOps platform engineering, join us at Hangar DX. It's dx.community. We host virtual events and podcast. Hopefully, this can be interesting learnings for you folks. Again, thank you, Matt.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.